on a downward legitimacy cycle, right? You know, I mean, that's the pattern over the long term. Now, of course, every pattern looks like it will repeat infinitely until, of course, it doesn't, right? So there probably will be some of it that will restore our faith in the federal government. Otherwise, we have a really sad future ahead of us. But the Supreme Court, you know, I mean, people go back to Bork, but you can go back well before that. I mean, there's always been a history of recognizing that the court wields a lot of influence, and it's kind of structured oddly, right? You know, we don't have to have 9 justices, and in truth, we probably should have increased the number and maybe split it up or have a more developed system. But of course, that decision itself is so politicized, because who gets to pack the court with all those replacements? And so there's sort of an inherent dysfunction in the design, right? That we're still with the same basic number, and it makes each slot that much more important, and then puts that spotlight on the politicization. I mean, I think it's embarrassing that we basically decided that, you know, a president only serves for 2 years and about 300 days before they can't nominate anyone more. I mean, that's just isn't, you know, showing a faith in our constitutional system. It's technical. I think it's absolutely constitutional for the Senate to do this. I just don't think it expresses a faith in our system. And so, you know, I do think that this is just one more thing that will undermine the way Congress is perceived, the way the courts are perceived, which is just that legitimacy is less important than political wins, right? And I think that's dysfunctional. It's what the, you know, one Federalist paper in particular was about, how factions destroy effective democracy, and I think that's sort of where we're at. I don't know, you know, that this is that different than the last several times, and the fact that we have all sorts of vacancies throughout our federal courts. Is this really that different? No, but it's just one more time that we're focused on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not going to get better before it gets worse. It may get better at some point, but it is going to get worse. You know, and part of that, I mean, there's lots of ways you could think about that. One is the kinds of issues the court has decided sort of invite politicization. So if you're going to start saying, you know, there's a right to this and a right to that, and these big issues that lots of people disagree about. I'm not saying that's illegitimate for the court to do, but once the court does it, then people start to see that it really matters who's up there making that decision. And so, you know, the battles become intense because of what Professor Young's talking about, concern about the outcomes of what will come from the court. And it's really not about, you know, they'll talk about, is this person credentialed or have the temperament or whatever, but it's never really about that. It's what the politicos want to know is how are they going to vote on the issues I care about. And when you feel like you have a 5-4 court, which we have had on many issues for many years, you know, depending on who's died or retired, it may make a lot of difference going forward. And so it becomes a huge political, that's, you know, my sense is actually going back to Bork, abortion was the issue that for many years was driving this because it was so close, and would Roe be overruled, and there were 4 votes many times to overrule it. I don't think abortion will be the issue this time because Scalia was one of the dissenting 4, and this would, if anything, just strengthen the protection for Roe. But there are other issues where his absence could flip the way of the court. And so, yeah, I don't have any good answers for it. You know, I do think the court is pretty legitimate in the sense of, you know, when you're talking about interpreting statutes and things, I think they really are, by and large, being lawyerly and trying to figure it out in the text and so forth. But when you go into the constitutional territory, you deal with so many vague provisions that the courts just have to decide which directions they're going, what rules they make up, and so it matters who's up there making those decisions.
And I've mentioned my favorite state Supreme Court opinion in the last 20 years. And even though I agree with the outcome, it makes it a little bit easier. But just the way the opinion was structured and the way the vote was the Iowa Supreme Court opinion in the gay marriage case. They were a state Supreme Court that was actually a majority of Republican appointees, and they unanimously decided that gay marriage was protected by the Constitution. And that was because they wanted to send a signal that, you know, whatever outcome was going to be, they were going to be unanimous. And they began the opinion by talking about Iowa's long history of civil rights, right? They actually didn't talk about the issue at all. They just said some things are more important than politics, right? And in this case, they said that Iowa, you know, they tried to, it was very pro-Iowa opinion, I have some fitting. It was about how, you know, they didn't allow politicalization to swallow up concerns of the minority throughout history, and that principle should stand above the politics. And so they decided to be unanimous and issue that opinion. Of course, what happened? There was a recall election, right? Money poured in from out of the states, and they actually get some, I mean, the one moment they tried to transcend politics actually caused a political backlash and undermined. So the favored opinion, you know, I like it, and I think it was a great message, but it was a horribly politically ineffective strategy. And as long as politics dominates things, those sort of moments, I mean, I can't imagine the Supreme Court doing that, right? The U.S. Supreme Court. It's everything's become so political that I don't think there's much hope for your generation. You know, to speak like that, but I don't know. I just, you know, the path has been downward for a while. It's sad.
Well, on that uplifting note, that's about all we have time for. So thanks everyone for coming out. I appreciate it.